Hi, and welcome to Virtual Campus Literature Week 2021. I'm Rashad Hussain, and today my colleagues and I will be discussing what it's like being in the MFA, our writing process, and how our writing has changed since we started. Really excited to see what will come out of this discussion, and we will start with the introductions. So we can
Hi,
start with Sunil.
everybody.
Sunil's on this side. So
Hi
we'll start, yeah.
everyone, my name is Sunil Whittle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vishala.
Hi, all, I'm Al.
Hi, and I'm Elise.
So I guess we could start with the overall experience with the MFA, things like initial expectations and how things are going right now, the program. For me, I was expecting more people when I came into the program. I was not expecting just the five of us. I was expecting at least 10 people. I was expecting published authors, like a good mix of very experienced people and people who are just starting out. Um, I was definitely intimidated, but as you all know, Dr. Amai is very, very accommodating, very understanding. I think she made the process of starting the program very smooth.
Definitely, definitely. I also was very intimidated. I didn't know what to expect, but and Rashad, I know you can speak on this, but we were lucky enough to do a creative writing course with Dr. Amai in our undergrad. And that was absolutely amazing, even though it was a poetry writing course and I'm not good at poetry. She somehow made me fall in love with writing poetry. And from there, I was completely sold on the program. But I was kind of scared because when I applied, I didn't think I was going to get through, to be honest. But it has been really amazing so far. And I won't lie, I was a bit um, I didn't know how things would go since we are virtual, and the experience that I had was in person. I didn't know if it would be able to translate virtually, and I was a bit scared. But we were able to connect really quick. Um, as you said, Dr. Amai has been absolutely amazing. She's so down to earth and accommodating, and as the weeks went by, I feel like we really saw the growth in our writing and we got closer. And this experience has been a highlight for the suckish year that was 2020, to be honest. So yeah, I have been loving it so far. And yeah, how are you feeling?
Good. I too was intimidated. Um, like Rashad said, I didn't know what to expect. I also thought it would be a lot more people in class. I was very surprised at the small number of people in class. I was disappointed that it was online because I am not necessarily good at keeping up with things unless there is like superstructure. You know, you need to be a specific place at a specific time, in person. Otherwise, it's kind of easy to let it go. But this course so far has been enjoyable. Dr. MI is very accommodating. It's not as scary as I thought yet. It might get scary later. Um, and thankfully, even though it's a small group, we all get along, so it's easier to, chat with each other and get help if we need help.
Exactly, exactly. For me, I did not expect to get in. It took so long that I thought I didn't get through, so I just was living life as normal. And then I got this email and I was so excited. And also I expected more people as well. For me, I got a little worried because after I got through is when I actually started to work in Tobago. So I was like kind of worried, but then everything is online now. So I got to work in Trinidad anyway. But so the virtual worked out for me. being virtual. Although you're so accustomed to being in person, and then meeting you all are so wonderful. And, I feel like, and I have to kind of pinch myself because we get along so well, and then I haven't met anybody in person. So that's, like a wonderful experience. I'd really love to meet you all in person someday. So that has been my experience so far.
Sunil is shaking his head. What is that, Sunil?
Nicer online.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, I think yeah, similar experiences. I got my confirmation kind of late also. And the next thing is I don't really have a background in fiction. I would have written a lot on nonfiction, on history and art. So I felt like I was at a disadvantage. But Mr. Gibson, Dr. Amai, and then listening to pieces that would have been presented by the rest of the class, the other four of you, that really helped me, helped propel me, because I'm saying after the second week, I remember after class, I'm like, what am I doing in this class? I'm not built for this, but the teaching style, the structure of the course, wow, it was able for you, I was able to reach places, mentally and with my writing that I never would have been able to on my own. Yeah.
I think the really good thing about this MFA in particular is that Dr. Mai, she doesn't try to impose anything on our writing. She would give feedback, but the feedback would be open. It's just, as she would call it, things to consider. And one of the things I was worried about with the MFA is that my writing would have been steered towards a certain way, because a common criticism of the MFA is that all of the writing that comes out of it is basically the same. But well, in our case, at least, it's not the case at all. That's not the case. To comment on something that Sunil brought up, the online aspects of the classes, it would have definitely been better in person. But I think one of the main advantages of doing it online is that it takes a lot of the pressure of reading a creative work online as compared to in person. And I was wondering what you all thought about that, actually reading out your creative work out loud.
Ooh. Sunil, do you want to go?
I don't have a problem with it. I enjoy it. It's kind of like a performance in a way. I've been on stage since I was 10. I've been on the TV and the radio before that. So um, to me, it's not difficult. I am a trained broadcaster. So it's really easy for me to do. I don't necessarily like interacting with the camera because it's kind of strange looking into the camera and trying to pretend that somebody's there. Because if I'm looking at you all on the screen, it looks like you're looking down. So I do prefer person to person. But this is cool for me. I didn't mind at all.
Well, for me, as someone who has anxiety with speaking in front of large groups of people, um, listen, I've heard that I'm good at public speaking. I don't know why I always get that compliment, because there is always this like whirlwind that goes on in my head. I have really bad anxiety with it. So when it comes to reading my work, especially my creative stuff, to like a group of people, I get really bad anxiety and I hate it. But the positive of it being online is I can take off my camera and I can take my time, and you all can just stare at the screen and listen, and it's fine, because takes it takes a little bit of the pressure off. But um, it would be really interesting to really see like how the reading like plays out in person, because you can actually see like the full body language of the person reading it, and you can get like the full effect. But as someone with anxiety, I could take off my
But there's
camera.
no problem if you're nervous though. No matter who you are, if you're a singer, if you're a performer, or if you're a public speaker, before you go on stage, you're nervous because you want to give your best, you know?
That's true.
So even
But
if you're a professional, your nervousness doesn't go away.
that's true. But for me, this is gonna sound gross, but I don't know why, but my eyes tend to tear up and stuff, which is why it's good for me to take off the camera. It's because I can just let everything happen, and then when it's done, then I can listen to the critiques. Like I don't know why, but the reading is a lot harder than the critiques. I'm excited for critiques, which is so weird. But yeah, that is just my little 2 cents.
Yeah, reading in front of, yeah, I don't think I've done that since, since secondary school, you know. So you're talking about the 90s here, you know, I haven't read in front of a group. I mean, I speak in front of groups all the time, you know. And I guess as Sunil says, there's always a bit of nerves just before you start, I guess maybe for the entire day. But once you're there, once you know your stuff, once you're comfortable with it, you can do a good presentation. All right, what happens many times is that you would write and you would edit and submit and not read over, right? So sometimes I'm reading and I come upon a point where I need to be high or low, and I have to try to improvise then. So that is one thing. So sometimes I may read something and it may not come across exactly as it should in the narrative. That's my biggest problem there, or biggest concern. Mhm.
I don't really have an issue reading in front of people. My only problem is that sometimes while I'm reading online, somebody comes into my room and, you know, I have to do hand signals like get out, you know, but that's the only thing. But I really don't have an issue reading in front of people. The only thing with me is that sometimes, you know, you're wondering if your work good enough. That's about it for me. Is it good enough? You know, and then you have to read it for everyone. And then, you know, you kind of second guessing yourself and, you know, but so far the experience has been great.
I feel like
Interesting.
that's the lot of any performer or artist though. You're always questioning your work.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's a continuous thing. But I think one of the most interesting things about reading, well, my work at least out loud, is when I'm writing in Creole, it is very much improvisation at certain parts. Sometimes I would write Y-O-U, you, pronounce it as ya, T-H-E, the, pronounce it as D. And you have to decide where you're going to read D as a, U as ya. So I want to segue into this topic now. Creole, writing in Creole, challenges of writing in Creole. Thoughts on that?
Writing in Creole. Yeah, that is something that I was not accustomed to, except unless it's dialogue, of course, right? So, and then I'm an English teacher, so, you know, I'm just a stickler for grammar and all that. But, and I didn't even, it wasn't something that crossed my mind to actually write something in Creole, although I have read stuff that was written in Creole, but it's kind of harder to me. It's harder to read in Creole. I mean, I speak Creole, so those, you know, but it's harder to read because sometimes you're looking at something and sometimes you're like, how do you, what word is this? Or is this how it's spelled? It's supposed to be spelled, you know, you're not sure. Because there's no, what's it say?
Orthography.
There's no orthography for this word, and, you know, you're wondering if it's, you know, how does it translate with a foreigner who is reading it, you know? How do they see it? But it's something that I can, you know, do more often, like just, you know, write in Creole. That's my language. It's my first language, you know? Yeah.
I guess it shouldn't be a task, but it is because of how we've been cultured to write and speak. So it makes even chatting it makes it difficult sometimes because sometimes you have to switch. You know, you have to do the code switching. You know, depending on who you're talking to, we having a discussion with. So sometimes I think it translates in a writing because you may write a piece and think, yeah, this is my audience for this, you know, and say, okay, I need to reach a broader audience. So it might need to be standard. And then that is going to take away from the art now, you know, and from the realness of it. So it is, it's something I guess we'll just get better with more and more practice and with more and more writers writing in Creole, you know, and us having dialogue a little more in Creole.
Yeah, definitely. And like Elise said, like we are Trinidadians, you would think that it would be so easy for us to write in Creole, but I find that depending on the story, it can be a little bit intimidating at times because Creole is a very oral thing, and there is no set way for us to write Creole. And there are many different forms of Trinidadian Creole alone, depending on where you live in Trinidad. And Trinidad is already so small, right? Um, so it can be quite a bit intimidating, but for me, I find that sometimes when I write in Creole, I end up writing more authentic characters when they are set in Trinidad. And the way that they speak, the way that they sound, and the way that the writing moves, it's more real and it feels more familiar. Um, but then on the other side, it tends to be a little bit intimidating because I think too hard about it, which again, that is something that I'm sure all of us can relate to in different ways. So I guess it really is up to experimenting and see how well you can utilize Creole, because I really think that as Caribbean writers, we should be able to write in our language wherever we feel like we want to write in our language, regardless of whether we have an intended audience or not. Like, this is how we speak, this is us. And if we do want to put part of ourselves into our narratives in some way, then we should be able to explore that as much as we would like to. So,
But this is one of the great things for me coming into the MFA because in Darren's class, um, I was able to learn that writing in Trinidad dialect does not limit the topic or doesn't limit the content of the story. You know, before that, you kind of think about the plays that are performed here or things like that, or scenes that you see around you as what is applicable. But, you know, it never occurred to me that sci-fi or magical realism could be written in Trinidad dialect, or that the characters could be, the character of the story could be Trinidad based. You know, even if you are creating an entire world, it could be a world that is familiar to Trinidad or Trinidadians by the way that the characters express themselves. But you are right, Vishal. So sorry, that was a good part. That's a great part of the MFA for me. And I have to thank, I can't remember his last name. What is Darren's last name?
Mr.
The
Gibson.
Gibson. Yeah.
Mr. Gibson. I have to thank Mr. Gibson for that, for expanding my thoughts and how I saw myself as a writer. Um, but like you said, Vishal, I also agree that writing in my natural tongue, my natural voice, helps the story to move along so much more smoothly. I feel like it's my writing is more exciting, and the characters are realer than if I were writing in standard English, because I then kind of have to stop and think about, all right, how would this character say this particular thing and stay true to themselves? Whereas it's so much easier for me to, throw out five different people all talking their brand of themselves, and it's just really easy. It's easier anyway.
Yeah, I
I
always
did.
think about three forms of music within the West. Think about calypso, soca, hip hop, and reggae, and imagine these forms being being presented in any other form other than the vernacular. Think about how that would sound. And I guess the appeal internationally is because of the not just the accents, but the language, the dialect.
Right.
I think there's a certain exotic elements to that some people assume um because it's different and it sounds a bit exotic. Um, but I remember when I did Mr. Gibson's undergraduate prose writing course, and I had asked him for one assignment if I could have written it in Creole, and he was like, "Why is that a question?" And I get why he asked that because Creole right now, in contemporary Caribbean writing, is a huge thing. Is a huge thing, and a lot of people are doing it really, really well. Marlon James comes to mind. Ingrid Pisod. Um, it's not easy writing in Creole. I think a lot of people assume that it is easy writing in Creole, but it's not. Um, I've written in Creole. To me, it's a bit harder than writing in standard. Standard has rules, it has spawns. You're accustomed to writing in standard. Creole is wild in a way because certain ways you have to decide for yourself how to spell those words. You have to be consistent with those spawns. You have to decide in dialogue how are you going to reproduce those words in dialogue, how you're going to distinguish between characters' dialogue styles. Um, so it is a challenge. I would say that Creole is one of the biggest challenges for me when I'm writing because I do write in Creole often. So I think we should move on to that topic. What
Wait,
our biggest
before
challenge?
we move on, I have a question for you all. Um, when writing in Creole, have you ever like stopped to consider or stopped to question um, or have this fear of your stories kind of sounding familiar or sounding the same when you're writing in Creole?
Like
Yeah,
all the stories
yeah.
sounding the same.
Yeah, like maybe some of the voices, even though they're different stories, maybe some of the voices kind of bleed together and they sound similar or the same, because that is a concern that I have found myself with recently. And then I also had to like sit back and really like pay more attention to, the details of the characters and all of that, because I think with writing in Creole, there are a lot of people that kind of sound the same in real life or kind of
Right.
speak in a similar way. So I was actually thinking, okay, so how do we now try our best to make sure that our stories or our voices are not sounding the same or sounding way too similar? And how do we like make that variety come across in our writing?
I think like in character building, you could do that. So one character speaks a particular way based on their background, and then you could shift it up. You could shift it up and have somebody who might use the same tones, some of the same words, um, but have them present a different topic, a different individual altogether. So in reading, you would discern that these are two different characters, right? Based on the conversation that they have, even though that the voice may still sound the same.
One thing you
Right?
could take into consideration is the varieties or levels. So acrolect, mesolect, and basolect, and you could change that around with characters. It's easier to do in dialogue, I think. An interesting way you could vary it is through spelling, but then that creates an issue with consistency. But you could play around with it. I think a really good way, well, this goes for most things in writing, but just practice, practice, practice. But yeah, acrolect, mesolect, and basolect, I forget the term for that. But yeah.
Creole is one thing I do. I try well, I guess all of us do this. We would have the conversation in our minds, right? And I would sometimes just spell the U as opposed to YUH as it sounds, but because I could read it like that, especially if I am reading, I could read it like that, and that is the I guess that is the divide there, because now the reader is trying to read it in standard English, but with Creole, we have the terms. We have the terms that are not found in English or American English, that are specifically Trinidadian, maybe Caribbean, or maybe based on where you live in Trinidad. And I think that those are some of the words that are quite difficult in spelling, and sounding out. So that was one of my major issues, and one of the ways in which I deal with presenting Creole.
The hardest word to spell is buff. Nobody knows how to spell buff.
Oh my
How
God.
to spell
Yes.
buff? No clue.
I spell with O's, because I look for an English word.
Right.
Look for an English word that sounds like it, like book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I never
Yeah.
thought about that.
Yeah.
I think I spelled it like BUFF once, but I was like,
And that's
buff.
buff.
It's
Yeah.
buff, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, how do you really spell buff?
Yeah.
It's called BOUF, I think.
And then but that
That's
sounds like a French thing. Something.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
I would spell it with 2 O's and 1 F.
Yeah. I'll simplify it so that, yeah.
2 O's and 1 F.
Yeah.
I never thought that makes a lot of sense. Never thought about that.
Yeah.
But to
Like-
Bashara's point, I think that might be pressure that you're putting on yourself, though, because even if writing in standard English, if all the characters are from the same neighborhood per se, you write it in standard English, they're gonna sound similar. So I feel like it's the same thing when you're writing in any kind of language from anywhere, if it's a creolized version or whatever. Characters gonna sound similar. Maybe you might consider like catchphrases or certain things that people say continuously.
The issue comes up when you're writing in the first person perspective, and you keep writing the first person perspective, and all of your stories have that same first person voice in Creole, because I think we all tend to write Creole in first person. I don't think anyone here has written a third person Creole story as yet that I've heard.
Yeah.
But yeah, we tend to naturally gravitate towards the first person in Creole. And for me personally, if I'm writing a Trinidadian character in first person, it feels strange to write it in standard English if it's a Trinidadian character, unless I characterize that person as having some reason for speaking in the standard. But you have to find ways to distinguish those first person voices. And I think that comes with really considering the character themselves. Certain words that they would use, where on the continuum, the acrolect, basolect, mesolect, that they would fall. That was the term I was looking for, the Creole continuum. But yeah, those are some things to consider regarding that question.
And what Suno says, it's easier for you to build characters using Creole as opposed to standard English, because we don't that's not how we speak now, right? So I'm going to think about 5 characters that speak in standard English, and I wouldn't be able to pull 5 characters from my neighborhood, from work, from anywhere, right? the quote unquote standard English may appear on TV to a point, and then they're using their own local vernacular there. So if I want to build like 3 characters or even 10 characters, it's easy for me to pull from conversations and people that I've met who speak like me, who speak the vernacular, etc. So it is. So I think that is another thing that we gotta look at. You know, who we looking at as characters.
Definitely. See, this is the beautiful thing about our connection. We can always help each other with anything.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah. I thought we could have moved on to our main challenge with writing in the writing process. For me, my main challenge, I would say, is editing as I'm writing, which kills creativity. So I'll write a paragraph, stop, backspace the entire line, sometimes backspace the entire paragraph, take out a word, change up a sentence, and I will spend 2 hours on one paragraph, sometimes 3 hours on one paragraph, sometimes a week on one paragraph. But when I'm writing a story, the first paragraph always has to be perfect. And a lot of the times I don't finish a story because I'm continuously working on the first paragraph or the first page. So yeah, that's my main problem, editing as I'm writing, which destroys creativity.
I am, that is interesting because my process is completely opposite. But I also struggle with editing, but the way that I write, I just sit down and I write, but I tend to jump from different parts of the story. So let's say I start at the beginning and I am writing, and I don't know why, but I tend to get fed up of writing that part. So then I would jump to the end and I would write the entire end of the story. Then I would go to the middle. And that is one of the challenges with that, is making sure that they connect well and that they flow well when writing like that. But the editing process in itself is also a struggle for me because I hate editing. I hate it with a passion. I struggle with it a lot because I have this attachment to certain parts of the story that I know doesn't fit, but I want to keep it. So it's like an internal struggle with myself. No, you need to cut this. It doesn't work. Why? This character would not speak like that. This character would never say something like that. You need to take it out. And that is, yeah, it's really a struggle, but it's always been a struggle. But the good thing with the MFA is that it has helped a lot. And hearing the feedback from each other as well also helps with the editing process. I don't know if everyone's process is different, but I highly recommend just sitting down and writing and not editing while you write. Keep it separate. Keep the editing process on one side and the creative part of the process on one side. You just let the creativity flow. Just let it go, and you can go back and edit, because when you do set aside that time for the editing process, it's in itself, then it wouldn't mix with the creative side of it that much, and you can let everything unfold how it wants to unfold. I don't know if that was helpful, but
it was. It was because I would do that. I would write and I would go back specifically for areas like Rashad said he'd spend hours on a paragraph. Right. Sometimes I am creating a scene and I have to create the scene in my head, and I create that whole setting in my head. And I may start writing it and then get a better one, or start saying something and then another statement comes up. I go through my notes and I find a little phrase that could fit in there. And sometimes I miss that I had stopped and I add that phrase, and then it sounds wrong when I reread it now. Right. That is one of the things I would go I would have to edit on. The next thing is how Microsoft Word is set up. Right. So yeah, it constantly shows you errors. And you need to remember, I am not writing a history paper. I'm not writing in an art review, right? I am writing creatively. So a lot of these things, no, do it. So if I see a misspelling, I will deal with that, unless it's in the vernacular and I put the quotes in and stuff. But yeah, it's Microsoft Word is a little impediment. Yeah.
Definitely. The red squiggly lines will haunt you.
Especially if you're writing in Creole.
Is it blue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the blue is fine, but when you're writing in Creole and you see those red squiggly lines and you know you can't, there is no change for it, and you just have to hit ignore all the time, just like ignore.
Add the dictionary.
Oh.
Nah, the red squiggly don't really bother me. It's the blue.
The blue, yeah. The blue might state any statement.
Okay, and okay. I said what I said. You're gonna have to hold on to it, you know what I'm saying? But the hard part for me is unlike you, Vishal, I don't know how you do that jump to the end because I never know what the ending is. I don't know where the story is going. I don't know anything except what the character is telling me or what the story is telling me in that moment. So when we get to the end, it's because all of us get into the end together.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, hey, this was real nice, but it's a real good story. So it's like I'm telling myself the story as we go along. Which was another thing that I was intimidated by coming into the program because, you know, when you're writing in secondary school and they're talking about developing a story or developing a plot, they want you to write specific plot points, get to the climax and the denouement, is that what they call it? And so you kind of have to have an idea of where you're going. And that always gave me some trouble in school. I mean, school was a while ago. But I thought it was going to be the same thing where you came into a really structured program where they wanted to see the entire thing, you know, in points. You know, they want to see plot points before you continued with the writing. And I was like, I'm probably going to have a really hard time because that's not something that I can do. Somebody did give me some good advice, which was just if that's what is required, give them what they want, but then write what you want, right? And I was like, oh, okay, well that makes it easy. So you just make up anything on the spot and then write the story as it unfolds to you, even if that deviates from the plot points that you put forward. So I thought that was going to be a big problem, but the story unfolds to me as it's being written. I really never know what is happening. I wish I did sometimes.
Yeah, Vishal has a very interesting thing. I mean, I might try that sometime because I think it's extremely interesting to have a start of a story. You set your story, and then you create an end. And if your end is really far from the beginning, then that body could be extremely interested, extremely interested. Like it starts off where you're going to buy fish, and it ends up where you're somewhere in France, trying on clothes and you run away. Yeah, that is a big move. You can imagine a story like that. Maybe you should write one like that.
Maybe I should. I don't know if you all remember the Papa Stew story.
Yeah.
That was pretty long.
Yes.
And
all right.
I wrote that all over the place. Like I wrote the beginning and then I got tired of the beginning and then I went to the middle and then I got tired of that and then I went to the end. And I jumped all over the place. And I don't know, sometimes that just happens. I think I have a short attention span, which is really bad. So if I focus too much on this one specific part, then I would get too in my head about it and I would think too hard and I would want to edit on the spot like Rashad does. And that makes the writing process for me not enjoyable. And I want to be able to enjoy writing. So that is why when I realize that I tend to stick too much on this one specific part and I'm editing it on the spot, then I like completely leave that there as it is, and then I go and write the part. So everyone's process is different, but you should try it out and see if it works for you. See what you end up with. Like maybe you end up, I don't know, start in Trinidad and you end up in Prague, somewhere, Rashad.
Yeah.
I think it's always a good idea to try out different writing processes, different habits. But yeah, what about you, Luis?
Well, I know a challenge I had. Well, I didn't realize it was a challenge until when I think Dr. Amaya said I had rushed too much to the end. Um, yeah, I rushed too much to the end of the story, and I leave out stuff. I leave out details that could have been added, added in to to give it some body. Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
working on that. I'm working on that. I'm getting longer stories now. Now I'm told I'm doing little novels now.
You really do. You write novels in the form of short stories, and you leave us wanting more. It's unfair, at least.
So, but I have really seen growth in my writing. I've seen that growth.
On a earlier
Just
point,
something that Suno was saying about the structure of the program. I think a really good thing about this MFA is that there is a structure,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very, very flexible. Like if we want to talk about a topic during class when we have to give feedback, we could just bring it up and we could talk about it. Like it isn't stuck to one particular thing. I think that's great.
Yeah, same here. Like we've had a lot of really engaging conversations, especially with something like Creole. Um, so it's really good to have that freedom to be able to bring something to the table and have a discussion. And we all are very respectful of each other's opinions, even if we don't agree. And it's a safe space. It really is a safe space. Dr. Amai has done a great job at creating that, and even Mr. Gibson as well. And he has also added a lot to the conversation. So we were lucky, Olio.
Yeah.
yeah. All right, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.